Good morning, and welcome to your Stylo News Intelligence Update. For the past 2 weeks, a complex, multi-front conflict involving Iran has put the entire Middle East on high alert. Today, we're breaking it down. This morning's briefing is brought to you by ProWave AI. They're the developers of Stylo Intel Ops and, of course, Stylo News, providing AI-powered, on-demand news and intelligence. So when we talk about a multi-front battlefield, what does that actually mean? You see, this isn't a conflict with one clear front line. It's being fought across three key domains: on land and in the air, at sea, and of course, in cyberspace. So let's start with the most visible part of this conflict, the kinetic campaign. Now, that's the term for direct military action, the physical use of things like missiles and drones. As you can see from this map, the conflict is really spread out. It's not contained to just one country's borders. We're seeing reported Iranian attacks targeting Israel, United States assets, and allied Gulf nations across a pretty vast region. Our analysis, which we assess with moderate confidence, points to a very specific four-step pattern in these attacks. It seems to begin with mass salvos, that is, launching drones and missiles all at once to try and overwhelm air defenses. Step 2 is then probing those defenses, looking for any gaps they can exploit. After that, we see a diversification of targets. And finally, the fourth step is all about strategic signaling, to make sure the political impact is just as powerful as the physical damage. And that target diversification is really key. You can see here it's not just military infrastructure being hit. For the US, it's bases and critical support aircraft. For the Gulf states, the targets are economic: ports, energy facilities, industrial plants. It's a broad campaign aimed at the entire logistical and economic architecture of the region. All right, so from the air inland, let's move to the sea. The conflict's second major front is maritime, and it's centered on the world's most vital oil artery, the Strait of Hormuz. And this brings up the critical question, one that has huge implications for global markets and security. Is the world's most critical oil choke point being closed? Any disruption here could have immediate, widespread consequences. Well, our assessments indicate with high confidence that the strait does remain open. A full closure is unlikely. Why? Because it would almost certainly trigger an overwhelming military response, and it would also damage Iran's own economic interests. So the most likely course of action seems to be selective disruption, a way to exert pressure without a formal blockade. And this map really shows you that operational environment. You can see the high-risk shipping lanes where these tactics are playing out. We're talking about naval harassment, drone surveillance, things that create significant friction and insurance risks for commercial shipping, all without a full-blown blockade. Okay, so we've covered the kinetic and the maritime. The third front is one you can't see, but it's just as pervasive. We're talking about a sophisticated and expanding cyber war. And the scale here is pretty staggering. In just the past few weeks, we've observed roughly 5,800 cyber attacks, and these are coming from approximately 50 different groups affiliated with Iran, all targeting the US, Israel, and their allies in the region. What's really interesting here is the objective. It seems to be more about creating chaos and psychological impact than a financial motive. They're targeting critical sectors: healthcare, data centers for espionage, and even individual officials and civilians to conduct psychological operations. So, you have these three distinct battlefields. The crucial question is, how do they all connect? And what's the outlook for the international community? Well, part of the challenge is that the key actors all have very different perspectives. Iran frames its strikes as retaliation. The United States sees them as escalationary. And NATO is facing its own internal debate. These different views really highlight just how complex de-escalation is. And that international dimension is becoming more and more critical. For instance, a recent statement from NATO's Secretary General acknowledged the alliance is investigating Iran's missile capabilities. With a demonstrated range of up to 4,000 kilometers, those missiles could potentially threaten Europe, raising direct security concerns for the whole alliance.
So what does this mean for the immediate future? Well, our overall assessment, with medium confidence, projects a period of continued but managed confrontation. For the next 24 to 72 hours, the most likely scenario isn't a massive war, but rather continued high alert, information warfare, and selective maritime harassment.
Now, this has just been a high-level overview. To really understand the details behind this analysis, we invite you to our full-length briefing.
In the complete Stylo News Intelligence Update, we do a much deeper dive into the intelligence, the sources, and all the strategic implications of what we've talked about here.
You can find our program on all major podcast platforms or simply by following the link in this post.
Thank you for joining us. The immediate future appears to be one of carefully managed tension. But that leaves a lingering question. How long can a conflict on 3 fronts be managed before one of them spirals out of control? For AI-powered news on demand, we encourage you to visit us at stylonews.com.